Let's start off by talking about social media. How do you usually keep in touch with friends and family?
Through social media, because I live far away from most of my family members and friends. And during my week, it's very hard to find a moment to get on a call and spend maybe like an hour, updating them. But through social media, through the chat applications, it's possible to be in touch and give each other life updates in a very convenient way. So we can, keep each other update and know what's going on in our lives without having to take so much time out of our busy schedules. So I think overall they're a great tool and I use it regularly. I also use stories a lot, so I can update as many people as possible at once.
What's your favorite way to communicate with your friends and family?
Stories. Stories because I like speaking and talking a lot. And rather than texting, I would rather show them my emotions. And I can do that conveniently through stories. So I have my group of private friends where I have pretty much all my close family members and close friends. I can speak there freely about what's going on in my life. So definitely stories.
And how much time do you spend each day on social media and messaging and things like that?
Um, I would say quite some time. For sure, a few hours. I start in the morning by checking what was going on the night before, if I fell asleep early. And then definitely throughout the day, I will constantly and regularly check all the applications to see if there is any important update. I do have FOMO, fear of missing out, so I make sure that I'm updated with everything that's going on.
Now let's talk about learning new things. How do you like to learn new things? Before we continue, I've created something special for you. It's a complete speaking breakdown of the assessment that we're doing today that shows you exactly how our student went from being nervous to Band 8 in just 30 minutes. Inside, you'll see the real examiner criteria, why some of our mistakes didn't matter at all, and how to identify your own mistakes at home using the same system. Click the link in the description and download it for free.
I love it. I love it because I love growth. I love the process of growth and expansion. I think learning new skills is a great tool to work on ourselves. And I try as much as possible every day to learn something new or do something that takes me out of my comfort zone. Yes, I feel today it's very easy to live a comfortable lifestyle where we are not stimulated enough from a knowledge perspective. So I try as much as I can to remind myself that learning is a great way to keep the brain active.
What was the last new skill you learned?
Tango. I mean, I just started, so I haven't learned the full skill set of tango yet. I've started taking tango classes and building a choreography. And it's a very new experience for me, very surprising also. I do have experience in physical movement, in body movement, but in different forms. And tango, the connection that it requires with your partner, the work on the posture, on the attitude, on the character that you bring on the dance floor. It's really surprising, and it's a journey that I intend to continue on.
Do you prefer learning alone or with other people?
I love learning with other people. I work very well in a group class environment. Even when it comes to sports, for example, I love taking classes. I love Pilates, I love yoga. I don't like so much to go to the gym and teach myself gymming. I need the feedback from the teacher and fellow students to try and perform better every time.
Now let's talk about cafes and restaurants. Do you often eat out?
I do. I love the cafe vibes. I like sitting there, getting some work done, or catching up with friends, or just maybe sitting alone at a cafe. I love breakfasts. So I could have breakfast pretty much every time of the day. For lunch, for dinner, it's always breakfast for me. So, yes, cafes are a great environment to do that. And I also love people watching. So restaurants, yes, I like restaurants. Sometimes it's nice to go on a nice date and dress up nicely and go to a fancy restaurant. But overall, I would say I prefer the cafe vibe.
What's your favorite type of drink?
Coffee. I love a good Italian espresso in the morning, good Neapolitan espresso to be precise in the morning. That's my go-to. I cannot start my day without that. And I love trying out coffees from all over the world. I was in Vietnam and I remember Vietnamese coffee is really, really good, especially when they put some coconut milk in it, to die for.
In your country, have eating habits changed recently?
They have. So my country is worldwide known as the country of Mediterranean diet. However, over the last couple of decades, yes, 2, 3 decades, I would say, of course, there has been a huge influence from American lifestyle and convenience in food. Fast food have increased. Junk food has increased a lot in the supermarkets. And yes, even in Italy, nowadays, we do have a lifestyle where we prioritize convenience and ease when it comes to food rather than maybe cooking a full meal at home with homegrown ingredients, simple ingredients, which is very sad to me because I do think that fresh food, the nutrients that we get from fresh food, are so important for our everyday life and performance in life and at work. And unfortunately, even in my country, yes, processed food has taken over. So I've recently given important feedback to my boyfriend. We've started living together in the last year. And of course, we had to adjust to each other's ways of life. So I am a very tidy person. I do need a clear and decluttered space to have a clear mind. And he's a very creative person, so he thrives in a creative mess, which is fine for his office that is inside our home. However, for the living room and the kitchen, I felt that I had to remind him that it would be nice and considerate to keep things tidy. So both of us can live in the best environment for, let's say, for our personality type. And I do feel that he took the feedback very well. He's a very open person. He listens a lot. He's very tolerant, and is really genuinely interested in accommodating the other person's needs, if, of course, they don't impact with his needs. So the way we went about it is we had a very open and calm conversation, which I realize every day more and more is so important in a couple, because it's so easy to get upset and take shortcuts in dialogue. But dialogue is the foundation of every relationship, especially a loving relationship where two people who come from different backgrounds start living together. So overall, I felt that he took the feedback in a very positive way, and he started implementing from day one the changes that I had asked him to make to his tidying habits.
Let's talk about communication skills. What makes feedback constructive rather than critical? This kind of detailed speaking assessment is exactly what we do in the VIP course. You get the same breakdown that helped our student achieve a Band 8, plus a targeted plan for your specific weaknesses. And because you've watched this video, we know you're serious about getting the score that you need. I'm going to give you 10% off today to say thank you. Just click the link in the description to join with your discount.
So, I think that the way a message is delivered is as important as the content of the message itself. So definitely for a feedback to be constructive, one of the key points would be to give it in an understanding, polite way. Also, the tone of the voice is very important. And I understand sometimes we give feedback when we are upset or in a heated conversation, but we should try as much as possible to take a moment, breathe, maybe count to 10, and then deliver the feedback in a way of communication that will make the other person understand that we're in this together rather than in a clash. And definitely also another point that I think is important is to start giving feedback by actually acknowledging the positive. It cannot all be negative, right? So I always appreciate when a teacher or anyone starts giving me feedback by saying, it was great, you did this very well, you could work on this. It's a way more constructive way of giving feedback, I believe.
Why do some people struggle to accept negative feedback?
I think because of insecurity. Maybe these people are actually constantly giving themselves negative feedback. Maybe they have a very negative self-talk going on, and they are not ready to hear it from someone else. So they build a lot of resistance towards it. In my experience, I find that usually the most insecure people, they build a wall towards critical feedback. And their ego maybe gets in the way. So yes, definitely I would say because of insecurity, people who are more confident in themselves, for sure they've gone through the process of receiving feedback so many times that they are ready to take it.
Now let's talk about feedback in education. What role should feedback play in education?
I think it's one of the main components of education. It is important for a student to assess their level, and sometimes the student does not have the tools to assess his own level. So that's where the teacher, the mentor, the tutor, the trainer, the coach comes in, because that person supposedly knows way more about the subject than the student and can give them an objective assessment of where their skill is, and also, even far more importantly, what to do to improve their skills.
That is the end of the IELTS speaking test. And I'm glad you're so positive about feedback, because I'm now going to give you some feedback. I think you're capable of getting one of the higher scores, but I want to help you guarantee one of those higher scores by giving you some feedback and ways to improve to make you more confident on test day about what score you're going to get. So first of all, I'm going to go through each part 1, part 2, part 3, talk generally about strategies and tactics for each of those parts, ways you could improve. And then we'll talk about the individual marking criteria. So fluency, coherence, vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, all those good things. So part 1, you were a little bit nervous, which is natural. And what a lot of IELTS students don't realize is part 1, the reason why they ask you such normal everyday questions is they're anticipating that you will be a little bit nervous. So you did exactly what the IELTS test expected, which was you eased into the test. You were a little bit nervous in the beginning, but you got more confident and you relaxed more as you went through. And that is totally expected. A good examiner will not listen to your first couple of answers and go, she's nervous, she's has problems with fluency because she's nervous, let's give her a low score. They will base your score on your entire performance. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. And if on test day, when you do the real test, the first couple of questions you feel a little bit nervous, just know that that's totally normal. So what I noticed was you were having a little bit of a fluency issue. What I think was happening, you could tell me if you were wrong or not, was you were overthinking. Is that the case? Or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even if I'm speaking English or you're speaking Italian, if I was overthinking things, then I would have lots of these because our brains are like computers. If we overload a computer with too many programs open, then it will slow down and it will have problems. Exactly the same. So on test day, try to just understand that it is normal for you to feel a little bit nervous. But the other more strategic thing that you could do is limit the length of your responses a little bit in part one. So what I noticed was, again, you're making the task more difficult than it needs to be by adding lots of extra things that you don't really need to add. So it's kind of like when if you watch the Olympics and you watch runners running the race, at the beginning it's quite easy, and then towards the end they're really struggling. It's like you're running the 100 meters and you get to the 100-meter line and you keep running. When you've answered the question, when you've added enough detail, when you maybe give an example in part one, different for the other parts, but in part one, just stop. You don't need to keep going. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. Because what will happen is the examiner will, again, have to judge you on your whole performance. But if the first half of your answers are quite fluent, but the last half of your answers are having problems, then they're going to have to give you one of those lower scores for fluency. So you can just make your life easier by limiting the amount of ideas that you're throwing in there. To use an English idiom, you don't have to throw the kitchen sink at it. But I did notice that you gained in confidence as we were going through. Like when you were talking about cafes and restaurants, it was much easier than we were talking about social media, because I think it would be easy for you to talk about social media if you just talked to me normally. You were trying to really show me how great you were at the beginning, which again can be counterproductive sometimes. Part two was good. I really liked the tactic you used of using a personal example, a real story, because that allows you to be far more fluent than to think of something abstract or something that you're not very familiar with. Obviously, you're very familiar with who you live with and it felt like I was talking to a colleague or a friend about, oh, I just moved in with my boyfriend, and that's what it felt like. And that is that's your goal really for the IELTS speaking test, to make the examiner feel like they're talking to a friend or a colleague, and that's what it felt like. So if you get a general topic like this one, so this one was describe a time when you gave someone important feedback, that is quite general. You could pick anyone. So you could have tried to let's talk about something very technical from work, and that might have led to fluency issues, but you picked something personal, which is very good. The only thing I would say for people watching at home is don't pick something too personal, especially if it's something upsetting. Like if you broke up with your boyfriend, I wouldn't, because he was too messy, I wouldn't talk about that, because I have had students cry in front of me, and we can't give you higher marks just because you start crying. Not that you would, but that has happened. Part three, I really liked the way that you developed your answers. So IELTS students understandably can get a little bit frustrated, because part one, we're saying don't talk too much. And then in part three, we're saying, to really develop your answers. So I don't think an examiner strictly would judge you solely on part three and kind of say, oh, well, she did really well in part three, But part one, she was kind of warming up a little bit. But your part three was a lot more impressive than your part one. And if I had to choose, is it better for a student to be better in part three or better in part one? I would say better in part three, because as I've said many times already, the examiner does know that part one, you're a little bit nervous, and part three, you really showed your level. So part one, the first few answers, I don't think was your real level. Part three, you did show your real level, but again, the examiner must judge you on your whole test, not just a few good answers. In the same way, an examiner will not judge you on a couple of bad answers. The examiner will not judge you on one or two really good answers as well. So I think if I was you, I would work a little bit more in part one. An easy way to do that would be, because a lot of students don't realize how much they're talking, is record yourself. So get some questions. You can find them online, get part one questions and answer them as if I'm asking you, and then listen back. And you, a lot of the time, be like, oh my God, I spoke for so long about that. And that will give you instant feedback without a teacher, and it's free as well. So let's talk about what score you would get. Let's talk about the things that you did very well, and then talk about the things that could be improved. So I think your main strength is pronunciation. You're Italian. You don't have many of the common pronunciation issues that Italians have. They're not weaknesses. They're not. I'm not saying there's any negative about Italian speakers, but every country, when they're speaking in a different language, has a common little issues. So many Italian speakers will add at the end of, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't have that at all. What an examiner will be thinking about more is, can I understand you? So I could understand every single word 100% clearly. So that is great. The other thing the examiner will be thinking of is something called higher level pronunciation features. These are things like intonation. So sometimes our voices go up, sometimes down. Italians are great at intonation. So it is never a problem. You guys, I think, are the world experts on conveying meaning through intonation and with your hands as well, I think, but you don't do that thing that many Italians do. Again, not in the comments. If you're Italian, I'm not criticizing. And then you also stress certain words to show emphasis, to show meaning. So all very, very good. I would say that you're at the highest level for pronunciation, which is a band 9. So the other real strength that you have is vocabulary. You have some amazing expressions, and there's no topic that I could throw at you that I think you wouldn't be able to speak to because of a lack of vocabulary. So you said, for example, I love the process of growth and expansion. I think learning new skills is a great tool to work on ourselves. So this shows that you can easily talk about abstract concepts like growth and expansion and work on yourselves effectively. Very, very impressive. Or for example, I'm a very tidy person. I do need a clear and decluttered space to have a clear mind. So you didn't just say, I'm a very tidy person. Then you followed it up by explaining, using great vocabulary like decluttered space and clear mind to explain exactly what you meant. And similarly, he's a very open person. He listens a lot. He's very tolerant and is really genuinely interested in accommodating the other person's needs. Again, excellent vocabulary. Other ways that you described your boyfriend is he thrives in a creative mess. I thought that was excellent. That was quite poetic. Although there were some small issues, for example, gymming. We would say working out or exercising rather than gymming. Not a huge issue. There might have been other small vocabulary errors. I didn't pick up on any. And one thing I thought that was really impressive was you used multiple synonyms sometimes in one sentence. So you said, for example, the teacher, the trainer, the mentor, the coach. I've never taught that because I think it's quite difficult for students to do. I've never used that as a strategy, but it could really convince the examiner that you deserve a high score by instantly coming up with 4 different accurate synonyms for one word in one sentence, for example. And then when we add in expressions like negative self-talk, build a wall, there's so much great vocabulary in there. Again, I would give you a band 9. So the next category is fluency and coherence. Coherence is, did you answer the question and did you develop it enough? No problems there. In fact, in part one, as I said, you really did develop it. You didn't go off topic, even though you did speak a lot in part one. So there's no problem there. But I think the issue that you have is related to those audible pauses, fluency issues. So those are when now everybody does this. If we went to Italy later today and we sat in a coffee shop and listened to people speaking Italian, they would be making those audible pauses a lot. Same as if we went to London and sat in a cafe and listened to native English speakers speak English, they would do it all the time. You do it a little bit too much, but there's a difference between, there's two types of fluency issue. So one is that you're trying to think of the correct grammar or the correct vocabulary. I don't think that you have that. I think the issue that you have is you're trying to think of the right idea. You're trying to think of the next thing to speak about. You're kind of thinking like a chess player 3 moves ahead. You know, you can tell that you're not really focusing on the sentence that you're saying. You're thinking of what's happening 3 moves ahead. The other thing is just pick, like, you were so fluent in part 2 because you were talking about something that was easy for you to talk about. So even, you know, more unusual questions like, how much time do you spend each day? Or talking about social media, just say, oh, I was talking to my mom or my sister, or, you know, just in a natural way. Or even more abstract questions like, what role should feedback play in education? I was doing an IELTS test the other day and my teacher was saying this, you know, it's a speaking test. It is not a PhD, you know, presentation. So that would really help your fluency. But I don't think right now you would get one of the higher scores. I think you would get a band 8 for fluency. A lot of people think that band 9 fluency is never having any audible pauses. It is not. People, as I said, we could go to and speak to very intelligent people in Italy right now who are very good at speaking, and they would have some audible pauses. You just have a few too many because it is obvious you're thinking of what to say rather than speaking. I know you have to think. It's part of speaking, but you know, imagine speaking to your boyfriend when you go home tonight and your boyfriend's like, hey, what was it like? You're not thinking about what to say to him. I wouldn't say in general life you need to work on it. It's not a criticism. It's just, you know, my job is to help you get the highest IELTS score. Please don't go away from this thinking, oh my God, I'm a terrible speaker. You're not. You know, it's just, this is an IELTS test. So I'm trying to help you as much with that. But the way I always describe it to students is like, when you were a kid, you had to think actively about how to tie your shoelaces. When you're tying your shoelaces now, you don't even think about it. Or when you were first driving a car, you had to think, which gear am I in? Or, you know, check them, actively, consciously think about these things. Now you don't even think about it. You just do it automatically. I think your fluency could really improve if you just live in the moment a little bit and just speak naturally like you would to your boyfriend at home, or your mother or your sister. So I think overall for fluency and coherence, you would get a band 8. Don't forget to download your free band 8 speaking assessment breakdown. It's the complete system that helped our student understand her real level and achieve band 8. Everything we covered today is in there, plus your own evaluation checklist. Link below in the description, and you'll also find the 10% discount on the VIP course. So the last one is grammar. So again, a lot of people think that band 9 grammar is perfection. Even as a native English speaker and somebody who, you know, teaches English for a living, I will make small little grammatical slips. You probably do the same thing in Italian. But in English, 98% of your grammar is good. But there are some little common issues that keep coming up again and again and again. So there's something in the IELTS test called systematic errors. Systematic errors are every time you use a certain system, such as articles or subject-verb agreement, you consistently make little errors there. For you, it's articles, so a and the before words, such as this.
My country is worldwide known as the country of Mediterranean diet.
So I think in the whole test, I spotted maybe 4 or 5 times that you had this error. It doesn't stop communication, which is great because I know exactly what you mean. So there's no way if I was working with you, if you were my work colleague, I'd be like, I don't understand what Diana's saying, she can't communicate in English. That's not what I'm saying at all. But a native English speaker would notice that, you would maybe miss an article or use the instead of or instead of the. It's not a huge issue, but because it's coming up so often, you wouldn't be able to get the top mark for grammar. But most of your sentences, the vast majority of your sentences, are completely error-free of grammatical errors. So you would get a band 8 for grammar. So 9, 9, 8, 8. Overall, you would get 8.5, which is extremely high. And I don't know the exact figures, but you'd be in the top 2 or 3% of English speakers doing the IELTS test. Less than 1% get a band 9. So you're doing very, very well.